The bitter winter air cut through the concrete walls of Hitler's Wolfslair bunker complex. Intelligence analysts huddled over reconnaissance photographs spread across metal tables. Their faces showed disbelief. The numbers staring back at them couldn't possibly be accurate. American bomber production was exceeding every projection, every calculation, every reasonable expectation. These weren't modest increases in aircraft manufacturing. The reports described production levels that seemed to mock the laws of industrial capability. Assembly lines stretched beyond imagination. B-24 Liberators emerged from factory gates with clockwork precision. One bomber every 63 minutes. The rhythm never stopped. Across the Pacific, Japanese military commanders faced their own crushing moment of recognition. The soft American civilians they had dismissed were building more warplanes annually than Japan had constructed during the entire conflict. America's single-year production in 1944 surpassed Japan's total wartime output. This transformation defied every assumption about American character, every belief about industrial limits, every prediction about wartime capability. The peacetime America of 1939 bore no resemblance to the industrial titan of 1944. Military aviation ranked 41st among American industries before the war. Companies like Boeing and Douglas operated as specialized workshops. Their largest contracts involved dozens of aircraft, not thousands, not tens of thousands. European nations had spent years preparing for aerial warfare. Germany's Luftwaffe emerged from Treaty of Versailles restrictions with modern fighters proven in Spanish combat. Japanese aircraft manufacturers had battle-tested their designs in Chinese skies. Their planes dominated Pacific airspace after Pearl Harbor. President Roosevelt's 1939 request for $300 million in military aviation funding seemed modest. Reasonable, almost quaint in retrospect. Nobody imagined this small seed would grow into an industrial forest that would dwarf global aircraft production. December 7, 1941, shattered American complacency forever. Rescue teams pulled survivors from burning battleships, while military planners confronted harsh reality. Japanese aircraft had demonstrated aviation's decisive power in modern combat. America was catastrophically unprepared. Roosevelt announced production targets that stunned his own advisors. 60,000 aircraft in 1942, 125,000 in 1943. Military officials sat in speechless disbelief. These numbers appeared conjured from thin air, impossibly optimistic projections from a president perhaps intoxicated by American confidence. German intelligence officers initially dismissed these reports as propaganda. Their own aircraft industry produced roughly 15,000 planes annually by 1941. How could Americans, starting from virtually nothing, achieve such astronomical figures? The mathematics seemed impossible. Japanese military leaders shared similar skepticism. They had perfected their aircraft and pilots through decades of warfare. Quality would triumph over quantity. Even if Americans somehow reached their production targets, inexperienced pilots flying hastily constructed aircraft posed no threat to elite Japanese aviators. Both enemy nations were about to discover how catastrophically wrong their assumptions were. What followed compressed industrial revolution into months instead of decades. American industry operated without fear of air bombardment. No military damage threatened factories. Critical materials remained available. This advantage, denied to Germany and Japan, proved absolutely decisive. Automotive giants transformed overnight. Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler converted assembly lines from automobiles to aircraft. Manufacturing techniques that created the world's leading automobile industry now applied to airplane production with stunning results. Standardization revolutionized aircraft manufacturing. Interchangeable parts eliminated craft-based construction methods. Moving assembly lines brought automotive efficiency to aviation production. Results exceeded everyone's wildest projections. Entirely new manufacturing complexes sprouted across the American heartland. Government investment funded construction at breakneck speed. The Willow Run plant in Michigan became the symbol of this transformation. Its assembly line stretched over 1 mile, the largest room under a single roof anywhere in the world. Henry Ford himself initially doubted aircraft production possibilities. His engineers studied every rivet of the B-24 Liberator, every joint, every component. They broke construction into thousands of simple, repeatable tasks. Skilled craftsmen working for weeks became unnecessary. Factory workers with minimal training could accomplish the same results working in coordinated teams. The human transformation was equally remarkable. Millions of Americans who had never seen aircraft up close suddenly built the most sophisticated flying machines of their era. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. They assumed roles traditionally reserved for men. Rosie the Riveter transcended propaganda poster status. She embodied an industrial miracle taking shape across the continent. By late 1942, German intelligence could no longer dismiss American production as mere propaganda. Luftwaffe pilots returning from British bombing missions reported increasing numbers of American-built aircraft. B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators appeared over European skies, in formations that grew larger monthly. The implications staggered German military planners. Their war strategy calculations assumed finite resources and production capabilities. Each enemy aircraft destroyed represented weeks or months of enemy production capacity. But if Americans truly produced aircraft at reported rates, the entire mathematics of aerial warfare required complete recalculation. Hermann Göring initially refused to believe intelligence reports. How could a nation barely possessing military air force 3 years earlier suddenly outproduce Germany's sophisticated aircraft industry? Reports suggested not just numerical superiority, but complete manufacturing philosophy transformation. German aircraft production remained largely based on traditional methods. Skilled craftsmen assembled each aircraft with careful attention to detail. Quality control was meticulous, but the process was inherently limited in scale. The German approach produced excellent aircraft in insufficient quantities for modern warfare demands. As 1943 progressed, evidence became impossible to ignore. American bomber formations over Europe grew from dozens to hundreds. Each raid involved more aircraft than previous ones. Many bombers appeared fresh from factories, gleaming with new paint and bearing recently formed squadron markings. Meanwhile, Pacific Theater Japanese military leaders experienced their own dawning realization. The Battle of Midway in June 1942 had demonstrated American industrial capacity could replace losses at alarming rates. But 1943 air campaigns truly revealed American production scope. Japanese pilots initially confident in superior training, and aircraft performance began reporting encounters with seemingly endless waves of American fighters and bombers. Mathematical reality became clear. Even if Japanese pilots achieved favorable kill ratios, Americans could replace losses faster than Japan could achieve victories. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto had warned before the war that Japan might run wild for 6 months to a year, but could not sustain prolonged conflict with American industrial capacity. By 1943, his prophecy was proving painfully accurate. Japanese aircraft production remained rooted in pre-industrial methods. Each Zero fighter was crafted with care, requiring skilled workers and significant time investment. Quality was exceptional, but quantity remained limited. Japanese factories produced roughly 16,000 aircraft annually, by 1943. Impressive by pre-war standards, but dwarfed by emerging American production. As 1944 dawned, American aircraft production reached levels that defied comprehension. Numbers rolling off assembly lines were no longer just impressive. They were historically unprecedented. In 1944 alone, the United States built more aircraft than Japan produced throughout the entire war. Peak production came in summer 1944. Month after month, American factories delivered aircraft at rates that seemed to violate industrial physics laws. The B-24 Liberator alone saw 9,199 aircraft built in 1944. Production peaks reached one bomber rolling off Willow Run assembly line every 63 minutes. But heavy bombers were just the beginning. Fighter aircraft poured from American factories in unprecedented numbers. P-51 Mustangs, P-47 Thunderbolts, and P-38 Lightnings emerged from assembly lines nationwide. Transport aircraft, training planes, reconnaissance aircraft. Every military aviation category saw production numbers that would have seemed impossible years earlier. Human stories behind these numbers were equally remarkable. Factory workers putting in 12-hour shifts, 7 days weekly. Engineers solving production bottlenecks with innovative solutions that would reshape manufacturing forever. Entire communities transforming overnight from agricultural centers to industrial powerhouses. By year's end, statistics would show America had achieved something unprecedented in industrial history. But impact went far beyond mere numbers. Psychological effects on enemy leadership were perhaps even more significant than physical reality of American air supremacy. At Ford's Willow Run plant, the impossible became routine. One B-24 Liberator bomber rolling off assembly line every 63 minutes. Behind this staggering statistic were thousands of human stories that defined an era. Margaret Thompson was 22 when she first walked into the cavernous Willow Run facility in early 1943. Like thousands of other women, she had never seen aircraft up close, let alone helped build one. Yet within weeks, she was riveting aluminum sheets with seasoned craftsman precision, part of a team transforming raw materials into flying fortresses. The noise was deafening, she would later recall. Thousands of pneumatic hammers, riveting guns, and machinery running 24 hours daily. But there was something else in that sound: purpose. Every rivet set, every panel installed, was going to help bring boys home. Over 12,000 women worked at Willow Run Bomber Plant. Each earned the same 85 cents hourly as male counterparts. A revolutionary concept for its time. These women, from farm girls to former teachers to factory workers, became the backbone of America's production miracle. Statistics were staggering even by contemporary standards. With 3.5 million square feet of factory space, 650 B-24 Liberators rolled off the line monthly by late 1944. But what made this achievement truly remarkable wasn't just scale. It was the speed at which ordinary Americans mastered extraordinary complexity. Consider the center wing assembly, the B-24's most critical component. This massive structure weighed over 2,000 pounds and contained fuel tanks that would carry bombers across the Atlantic. It required perfect precision. A single mistake could doom aircraft and crew. Yet workers who had been assembling car bumpers months earlier now crafted these vital components with accuracy that impressed veteran aircraft engineers. By mid-1944, German intelligence officers could no longer rationalize away reports flooding in from multiple sources. Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights over American cities confirmed what seemed impossible. Aircraft factories stretching for miles, with completed bombers lined up on airfields like automobiles in dealer lots. In 1944, German Air Force accepted 39,807 aircraft of all types, a massive increase from pre-war production, representing maximum effort of a nation fully mobilized for war. Yet intelligence reports suggested America was producing aircraft at nearly 3 times this rate, while simultaneously fighting on 2 fronts thousands of miles from homeland. Psychological impact on German leadership was profound. Hermann Göring had promised Hitler that no enemy bomber would ever fly over German soil. Now he faced reality of 1,000-bomber raids becoming routine. Mathematical impossibility of the situation became clear. Even if German fighters achieved favorable kill ratios, American production could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. General Hans-Georg von Zeckendorf, a Luftwaffe intelligence analyst, would later write in captured papers, "We calculated that to achieve claimed production numbers, every American aircraft factory would need to operate at theoretical maximum efficiency. No downtime, no quality issues, perfect supply chains, yet evidence suggests they have somehow exceeded even these theoretical limits." German response was mixture of disbelief and desperate innovation. Secret weapons programs accelerated. Jet aircraft to guided missiles, hoping technology could overcome numerical disadvantage. But time was running out. Each month brought fresh reports of American production reaching new heights. Japanese response to American production capabilities evolved through distinct phases: denial, concern, and finally, desperate acceptance. Japanese military culture, steeped in traditions of individual excellence and spiritual superiority, struggled to comprehend mass production warfare implications. Admiral Yamamoto's early warnings about American industrial capacity had been prophetic. But even he might have been shocked by 1944's reality. Japanese aircraft production, despite heroic efforts under increasingly difficult conditions, remained fundamentally limited by pre-industrial manufacturing methods and resource constraints. Japanese Zero fighters, renowned for maneuverability and range, were crafted by skilled artisans who took pride in each aircraft's individual perfection. A single Zero required hundreds of hours of careful assembly. Quality control was meticulous, but inherently limited in scale. In contrast, American P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts rolled off assembly lines in quantities that seemed to violate natural order. Cultural shock was perhaps greater than strategic implications. Japanese society had been taught that American civilians were soft, luxury-loving people incapable of sacrifices required for total war. The reality of millions of Americans working 12-hour shifts 7 days weekly to produce instruments of war challenged fundamental assumptions about enemy character. By late 1944, Japanese pilots began reporting encounters that defied belief. American fighter squadrons appeared to have unlimited replacement aircraft. Shoot down a P-51 over Philippines on Monday, and 2 more appeared Tuesday. Mathematics of attrition, which had once favored Japan's superior pilot training, now worked against them with crushing inevitability. Impact of American aircraft production extended far beyond mere numerical superiority. Sheer manufacturing scale created ripple effects that transformed global power balance in ways pure strategy could not have achieved. Allied air forces suddenly found themselves with options that had never before existed in military history. Damaged aircraft could be replaced faster than they could be repaired. Pilots could train on multiple aircraft types because replacement machines were readily available. Entire air forces could be re-equipped with newer models while barely pausing combat operations. Psychological warfare aspects were equally significant. German and Japanese troops looking up at skies filled with enemy aircraft understood they were fighting not just superior numbers, but industrial capacity that seemed infinite. The sight of fresh American bombers appearing over targets week after week, apparently undiminished by losses, conveyed a message more powerful than any propaganda. This war was already decided. American air crews gained confidence from knowing their nation's industrial might stood behind them. A pilot shot down over Europe or Pacific knew his squadron would receive replacement aircraft, often within days. This psychological advantage translated into tactical boldness that multiplied American air power effectiveness. Yet this production miracle came at enormous human cost, though different from battlefield casualties that dominated war headlines. Factory workers, many of them women new to industrial labor, worked under conditions that would be considered extreme by peacetime standards. 12-hour shifts were routine, 7-day work weeks common. Industrial accidents, while relatively rare given operation scale, still claimed lives among workers racing to meet impossible deadlines. Social disruption was equally significant. Families separated as workers moved across the country to factory towns. Communities transformed overnight from rural agriculture to heavy industry. At Willow Run, workers lived in hastily constructed housing that often lacked basic amenities. Production peaked at 1 bomber hourly. Employment reduced to 17,000. Thanks to efficiencies the auto industry applied to B-24 manufacturing. But behind these efficiency numbers were human beings pushed to endurance limits. Environmental impact was equally staggering, though largely unrecognized at the time. Resources consumed, aluminum, steel, rubber, fuel, came at costs that would only be fully understood decades later. Entire forests were cleared for factory construction. Rivers diverted for industrial cooling. Air quality suffered in manufacturing centers nationwide. As 1944 ended and Allied victory became inevitable, implications of America's production achievement extended far beyond immediate military outcome. Industrial capacity that had seemed impossible years earlier was now established fact, fundamentally altering global power relationships for generations. 8,085 B-24s were built at Willow Run Bomber Plant alone, representing just one factory's contribution to America's air armada. Multiply this by dozens of similar facilities nationwide, and the achievement's scope becomes clear. German and Japanese military leaders studying captured American production manuals and factory plans began understanding they had fundamentally miscalculated modern warfare's nature. This was not simply about superior strategy or individual courage. This was about complete transformation of industrial society for military purposes. Lessons learned during this period would shape post-war America's approach to both domestic policy and international relations. Confidence gained from achieving the impossible would influence American decision-making for decades, sometimes with beneficial results, sometimes with tragic consequences. Production methods developed to achieve these astronomical numbers revolutionized manufacturing far beyond aircraft production. Techniques pioneered at Willow Run and similar facilities would later transform automobile production, electronics manufacturing, and countless other industries. The concept of interchangeable parts, refined to new precision levels, made possible not just wartime production, but the entire post-war consumer economy. Quality control methods developed to ensure bombers built in Michigan could accept parts manufactured in California became the foundation for global supply chains. Perhaps most significantly, integration of women into complex manufacturing roles challenged social assumptions that would never fully return to pre-war norms. Rosie the Riveter was more than wartime necessity. She represented permanent expansion of human potential that would reshape society. In the end, shock felt by German and Japanese leaders when confronting American aircraft production in 1944 was more than military surprise. It was civilizational revelation. They had based war planning on assumptions about American character and capacity that proved catastrophically wrong. The America that produced over 100,000 aircraft in 1944 was not the same nation that had built fewer than 3,000 military planes in 1939. The transformation was so complete, so rapid, and so thorough that even Americans themselves struggled to comprehend what they had accomplished. This production miracle demonstrated that in modern warfare, decisive battles are often fought not on traditional battlefields, but in factories, laboratories, and hearts of ordinary citizens willing to sacrifice for extraordinary goals. Rivets set by Margaret Thompson and thousands like her proved as decisive as any military engagement. Today, as we face new global challenges requiring massive coordinated efforts, the story of 1944 offers both inspiration and warning. It shows what free societies can accomplish when united by common purpose, but it also reveals enormous human and environmental costs of such achievements. German and Japanese shock at American production capabilities reflected deeper truth. In the modern world, a nation's true strength lies not in military tradition or individual courage, but in its ability to mobilize the full creative and productive potential of its people. In 1944, America did exactly that, and in doing so, changed history's course forever. Assembly lines have long since stopped rolling, but the echo of those 100,000 aircraft still resonates through time. A testament to what ordinary people can achieve when faced with extraordinary circumstances. The winter winds that once carried intelligence reports through Hitler's bunker have long since stilled. But the shock they brought reverberates still. Industrial capacity unleashed in those desperate years reshaped not just war's outcome, but the very nature of human possibility. From the riveting stations of Willow Run to the planning rooms of enemy commanders, 1944 proved that the impossible was merely the untested. When free people unite behind common cause, mountains move, oceans part, and bombers roll off assembly lines every 63 minutes, forever changing the world.